Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 235 of ReelBlend, podcast that needs a new way to conclude each show. My name is Sean O'Connell. I'm the managing editor here at Cinema Blend. On this week's show, our first full trailer for Avatar 2. Oh, Kev, do you know Adam Sandler's favorite Jim Cameron movie? Sandler loves
The Way of the Waterboy.
There you go, Jakey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake, for getting me on that one.
Yeah,
Thank you. That would have taken me a lot longer to get there. Yeah. Me too.
All right, Armageddon Time is hitting theaters, and because of that, director James Gray joins us for what you guys will realize is a wonderful chat. I'll preface this by saying that we each got one question. So we asked 3 questions total, and yet I wouldn't have had it any other way. No. And you'll see what happens when the interview begins. By we, I mean, of course, Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Hello, Kevin. How are you, sir?
Just still laughing about that Waterboy joke. That was great. I'm doing great. Great to see you guys. And yeah, I mean, this is that busy time of year. So thank you to everybody who's listening right now, because we have a lot of big guests and content coming up. So stay tuned.
Well, a reminder that we started as an awards podcast, and so this is our time to shine. This is when we get into the fun stuff that we love talking about.
I was really planning on coasting it the rest of the year.
No, we need you to step up, Jake. Come on.
I'm tired.
We've been carrying you all year. It's your time to shine. Jake's Astros are in the World Series, and we're going to be watching them closely tonight. We're recording on Wednesday, Game 4, big one for Jake Hamilton. He's from Fox 32 in Chicago, although he reps Houston strongly. Hi, Jake. How are you?
Hey, buddy. Would you say it's fair to say that this week's interview with James Gray gets a little saucy?
Spicy.
And in ways that people don't understand just yet, but we'll appreciate.
I would say it's the sauciest interview we've ever had.
It is about as saucy as things get.
It starts saucy and it ends saucy.
It ends really saucy. You'll be able to see how saucy it gets.
Oh, this is a great plug for the YouTube channel. There's a visual element to the James Gray podcast that you're going to want to tune into the YouTube channel. And that's because Gabe Kovach, the producer, figured out a way to get this visual element included. Hi, Gabe. How are you?
I'm good, boys. Welcome to have everybody back. Full show this week.
Full show. All right. So as I mentioned, if you haven't watched us on YouTube, go over that way. YouTube.com/ReelBlend podcast. Check out the podcast, the weekly show in video form. Of course, you can get us all the different places where you listen on audio. And then on Mondays, we have a premium episode. So if you subscribe to premium, you get, first off, that bonus episode, but then you get an ad-free version of the show and a newsletter that I write every single week. And I will write one this week, and it's going to be, spoiler alert, a cheap plug for With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Blockbusters. There's a good chance that Kevin's copy of the book may arrive during the show while we're recording it.
No, it literally. So, right. I mean, I'm on East Coast, so I had originally had a delivery of 10 p.m. tonight. Actually, it was supposed to be the 16th of November. And then all of a sudden I get an email saying, oh, no, it'll be here at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, November 2nd. Now it's 5 to 8. So we are in the golden window of Sean's book. So the best part about this, by the way, is I just went to my my mailbox downstairs right after I got home from being on the air. And I walked in and they had Quentin Tarantino's new book, Cinema Speculation. So basically, I have 2 authors' books arriving at my apartment on the same day. One of them is Quentin Tarantino. The other one is Sean O'Connell.
There you go. See,
not a bad day for
no. That's a really good day to share with.
I guess I'll just get my copy of the book when freaking ever.
I don't know why yours keeps getting pushed back. I have no reason.
I love that your answer to there being a delay in me getting my copy is to rent a car and drive out to the suburbs
or an Uber. Do you not have an Uber app?
So you want me to spend $40 going there, $40 going back, and then pay bookstore prices for your book? Yeah, friendship would be a free signed copy.
He's putting a cost. He's putting a cost on our friendship, apparently.
Yes.
Well, then you can wait. You can wait.
I don't want to wait.
Okay. Well, the audiobook is available if you want to grab the audiobook.
I hear your voice all the time. I hear you talk about Spider-Man all the time.
Sean, I think you're going to sell 2 copies because mine comes tomorrow. But I was looking at my Kindle and I often sometimes I have like books that are only on Kindle. Sometimes I have books that are only physical. And then sometimes I kind of switch, just sort of depends if I'm traveling, and I'll buy like the Kindle version. I think I'm also going to get the Kindle version here.
Wow.
Gabe, I'm not opposed to that plan.
That's friendship.
Don't be afraid to double dip.
Do you have, is there an audio version?
There is, yes.
Please tell me it's you.
Who reads it?
The guy's name is Matt. I'm blanking on his last name. I know that his Twitter account is Matt's Dumb Voice, but essentially, Tantor Media is the group that handles the audiobook, and they will suggest multiple people to you. It's not always famous people. Like for the Snyder Cut one, the voice of the guy who does Superman for animated cartoons works with them and then read it.
That's
so
cool.
This guy, they pitched somebody first, and I listened to a couple of samples from him, and he was too serious and too dry. And then they pitched this other guy, Matt, who, Kev, are you looking it up for me? Is that what you're checking out?
No.
I'll look right now.
Please look on the audio copy of.
Did you ever, or is it an option for you to do it yourself?
No, I don't think so.
No, you want to get like an actual performer.
I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks now, and it's kind of an interesting field of production how they do those, and like, but like the fact that someone like went into a studio and like read
his name is Matt Weisberg Weisgerber or Weisgerber.
Okay, I think it's Weisgerber.
Weisgerber.
Yes, really nice guy, and I'll tell you this: what's surreal is listening to someone reading the book that you wrote. Like it's unnerving because you've spent a lot of time picking the words that you want to go in a certain specific way, and then they're reading it with their inflection, and it's weird. In a good way. It's cool, but it's unusual. So anyway, it's also unusual to listen to ourselves in interviews, which we don't often do. Do you guys ever go back and listen to the interviews? I listened to the Ron Howard one. I was really happy.
I listened to that just because I wanted to hear it. I wasn't a part of it. But you know, weirdly, like whenever I go back and listen to the show, I actually specifically skip to when I'm speaking.
Yeah.
And then I skip to the next part.
Jake has me send him timestamps of all his
the timestamps of when I speak.
He just skips through.
You should see the edit he has for the Tom Hanks ReelBlend interview. It's just his questions.
Yeah.
Yes. Like we aren't even
it's fantastic.
We aren't in the edit.
He asked me to cut out Tom Hanks. It's just him smiling and laughing.
Yeah. I was surprised that Hanks was not in there. It's just Jake's questions. There's nothing else in the interview.
And I also want to point out, because I think up to this point, Kev, you haven't listened to any of the Tarantino interviews, right?
I have not. I have a weird thing about hearing my own voice and stuff.
That's amazing. They're really good. You should listen to them. I know you were there when they happened.
I was there. I was physically there.
All right. Well, this one is a lot of fun. So there's a movie called Armageddon Time. It played a couple of different film festivals. Definitely played at Cannes. It's James Gray. He's coming off of Ad Astra, but has made a number of other really exciting films. We Own the Night and Lost City of Z and The Yards. And his new one is Armageddon Time. Again, very personal. A story about his childhood, essentially, and growing up in New York. And we touch on the autobiographical nature of that. But then also have a totally unexpected cooking segment that I think you guys are going to enjoy. And so without further ado, James Gray, the director of Armageddon Time on the ReelBlend podcast. Well, we know you have a big meal to prepare, so we don't want to hold you up for too long.
Oh, did you hear about that? Well, most of the cooking I did this morning. The problem now is I got to go out and shop for a dessert, which I did not cook. So obviously, I couldn't.
Just let us know what time we need to be there, and we'll be sure to bring a bottle of wine. And
I am curious, just because we're talking to you before, because this is before some big meal that you're having. Like, what are you thinking about for dessert? Like, do you have an option in your mind, or do you just go out and just kind of blindly look for something?
No, I have something in specific, because what you want to do is you match the dish that you make, right? Yeah. With the region, with what they would have. So, I'm probably going to go with a straight tiramisu.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong.
Wonderful Italian dessert from the center of Italy. And, I'm making a ragu alla bolognese with tagliatelle, which is from northern central Italy. And so you match that, and you match the wine with it too. You match a sort of northern Italian wine. It's very interesting. Italian food is fantastic because It's incredibly regional, to the point where Rome is very different from a city that's 100 miles north, and they're very provincial about it. Neapolitan food is very different from Roman, and each thinks the other is terrible. If you make a ragu in bolognese, as they call it, a kind of Bologna style ragu, that's very different from a Modena ragu. So, and Modena and Bologna are not that far apart. So my own recipe, by the way, what I do is a combination of Modena and Bologna, which is an absolute, beyond incomprehensibly offensive thing. But I think mine is the best of both worlds. And it's part of why New York Italian is very different from Italian. And that's, it evolved, because like a Roman meatball, for example, would be really small, and they're usually served with mashed potatoes, and they call it polpette. They're almost all veal. And the Italian New York meatball is quite large, and it's a combination of breadcrumbs, pecorino romano, beef, pork, and veal. And that's because the New York immigrants were not rich enough to get all veal, so they would cut the veal with other cuts of meat. But in doing so, they discovered that, I think the New York meatball is better.
It might be a little bit more tasty.
There's our headline right there.
This is awesome. I want to talk about food, man. This is great.
I know. Unfortunately, we're a filmmakers podcast, so we have to dive into the making of Armageddon Time. And so I'm going to dive right in with this one. I would love for you to talk about the difficulty, I perceived a difficulty on my end of walking a complicated line between making Paul, your main character, making him rebellious, but not unlikable to the audience, or if that's even a concern of yours.
It's a great question. I'm not so sure I have the answer. I guess what I would say in response to it is, you kind of think of it this way. Is what he's doing remotely understandable to you as the viewer? So in other words, I was a bit of a jerk, more than a bit of a jerk. I was quite a jerk, for example, to my mother. I'd openly make fun of her to her face and go wah, 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 like this and stuff. I was probably actually worse in real life than the kid is,
Okay.
But I felt that, that was something that, going back even to Charlie Brown, the kind of very famous what. It's sort of a known thing that, teenagers or almost teenagers regard adults as dopes. So you can understand that behavior. And then the question is the other behavior crossing the line? Well, maybe for some it is, but I tried to be, dare I say, as honest about it as I could, honest about his behavior and my behavior as I could, and then let people judge. It's not an easy question you answer, because some people you'll ask about the film and they'll say the kid seems terrific, I love him, and it's normally what kids do. And then of course there are other people who say, how could you do that to that character? He's a little shit.
I just found it interesting because you often took the perspective of the parent at significant times where we were, meant to sort of empathize with the difficult positions that they were being put in. And maybe it's because I'm a parent of two boys as well, too. So I viewed it through that lens.
No, that's not a silly thing to say at all. It's quite observant, because, making a memoir, it's not really an act of self-aggrandizement. It's not like an excuse for you to talk about how terrific you are. It's really it's an excuse, if anything, to spend time doing in cinema what we ordinarily would do either in the confessional or maybe with the shrink. In other words, you bear everything. You say, here's what's good about me, here's what's bad about me, here's the things that you see are frankly wrong with the world, because that's what makes for dare I use the word, art. And that's kind of the best you can do. It's really all you can do. And so when you say that, when I switch to the parents' point of view, the parents are all of us as parents, because I have 3 children, we are incompetent. There's no training really that's adequate for being a grown-up.
Mhm.
It's sort of like no matter how old you get, no matter how many books you read, you're playing house with your wife or husband or whatever. You're kind of like you're trying to fashion a home, and it's kind of feels like fakery in the bakery, but you're trying to do it. And so the actions that the parents do, I think, are actions of love, but also ineptitude at the same time, not knowing how to handle a kid. And that's why grandparents tend to be very, very good for us because A, they have the practice, they've done it already. And of course, B, they get to go home at the end of the day. So
Yes.
they get to be the good guy.
Yes, very true.
You know, James, this is a film podcast, so our listeners are very much into filmmaking, and I want to geek out with you because one of the last times I sat down with you was Lost City of Z, and you were telling me amazing stories about shooting on film and having in the jungle and having to ship the film off to get processed, not even knowing what you really got. And I know that you shot at Astra on 35, and then now this is digital. And my question to you originally was going to be, you know, what was the choice of going 35 to digital? And then I was reading today, this is interesting to me, that you actually shot digitally, obviously, but then you scanned it to film. And I was wondering if you could speak on that, but also the decision of going from 35 to digital, because the movie does look like 35. And I just found that to be, you really kind of achieved almost an impossible thing that I think when I was watching it, I thought it was for sure shot on film.
You know, I have a sort of mea culpa to do about that, because what you realize is that digital has been tremendously democratizing for the cinema, and it's much cheaper. And there are all these people who now make very beautiful films that would not have been able to do it when it was, 35 millimeter stock. But if you leave that aside, because here, the movie was $16 million, which is obviously for today a very small budget, but still affords you enough maybe to shoot on film. But part of the issue is this, that first of all, Kodak, I mean, God love them, they're so great, but there's just nobody working there anymore. It's kind of a shell of its former self, and they only offer you 2 stocks. And the stocks are designed for the digital intermediate process. In other words, they're not stocks manufactured anymore to maximize what we call the sort of look of film or older movies. They're sort of weirdly manufactured, partly to have a film look, but also for high resolution, for digital scanning. So invariably, what I faced on this movie was we tested the 35 and it looked great, and Darius knows how to shoot. And so it looked amazing. We actually tested 16 as well.
Oh, cool.
Which looked spectacular in a very different way.
Yeah.
But I found there were huge problems with 16. It wasn't the support system we needed. Mounting the lenses on the camera was impossible. A bunch of different sort of logistical challenges, which maybe we could have figured out if we'd had a lot more time and budget for testing. But we didn't. So then I was faced with this 35 million. Is this really boring? I feel like I'm going.
No, this is very much our. This is our show.
This is very literally.
Much.
I mean, I geeked out with you on Lost City of Z, all about your 35. So this is. Okay. I want to hear your evolution. Yeah.
Well, here's the way it pans out, really, and I'm going to get comfortable to discuss this.
Oh, good.
So then I faced a situation with Darius where we have 35 millimeter film that looks beautiful, but it's made to be scanned and doesn't really look like old film stock. It doesn't. And in order to see grain, it was almost impossible. Like the stock is too good. Mm. So then I took the film, and I remember we developed the test, and I took it home and I put it in the oven for about 140 degrees, the lowest setting, for about 8 hours, which is something I did it on The Yards, a movie I did 25 years ago or 23 years ago, and it worked great. And we had it developed, and it looked exactly the same. And I said to Kodak, I said, I put your film in the oven, I baked it. I said, isn't it great? It holds up to anything. I said, no, that's not good. I wanted to degrade the image a little bit. So then you realize what you're actually seeking no longer exists. So are you going to be one of those people that stands on ceremony and shoots film just to say you did it?
Right.
Or are you going to try to achieve the actual look that you want? So how would I achieve that look on film? Well, that would mean underexposing at least 2 stops, maybe pushing the stock, maybe sometimes pulling the stock. It would mean old lenses. It would mean adding grain in the DI. Like all these things that after a while you say to yourself, well, what the hell am I shooting film for? Because I'm doing all this stuff anyway to try and make it look beaten up. Now, I would still have shot film if it were just the Alexa. But on this movie, we used something called, we used the Alexa 65.
Right. Didn't Koran use that for Roma? And yeah,
That's right. That's right. And also Alejandro Inarritu used it for The Revenant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Alejandro raved about the camera. He just said he would never use anything again. And Bong felt the same way. You know, I did the research. I talked to these guys. You know, and Bong was also like a total film guy. But he was like, no, this camera's the thing. Now, the 65 has an insane resolution, but to manipulate it is easier because you can see what you're getting on the set as you're doing it. And it's a direct feed in the DI. Now you're talking about saying I did not scan the movie onto film. It was part of our plan. So I don't remember when I said that. I can't remember what part of the.
Yeah, I read it in IndieWire, so I wasn't sure how. That's why I wanted to ask you about it. Yeah,
it was part of our plan to do it after Cannes because we didn't have time before Cannes. Cannes, we went with a rough cut, and it was insanity. We planned on doing it after Cannes, and when I looked at the tests, it still wasn't really achieving what I wanted because all it was doing was making it look softer, slightly out of focus. It was not adding grain. It was not adding the life that I felt I needed. And, you know, Matt Reeves and Greg Fraser did it for Batman. They shot with the 65 and went to film. Wow. And so I asked Matt about everything that he did. He explained to me there was a very arduous thing. Like some shots look better. You'd have to go and use a certain stock, blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't have the time or budget or ability to do any of that. So finally, I just used, I applied a very old 35 millimeter film grain app, frankly, to the digital file.
Wow.
And what you're seeing is basically an entirely electronically created simulacrum of 35 millimeter film from 1980. And I have to say, I think it's pretty close.
It looks amazing.
Wow.
I was, if someone asked me if this was shot on film, I would have said 100% yes.
Yes.
We A-B, towards the end of the process, we A-B'd that with the DI that I did for a movie called We Own the Night, because that was the oldest I had a DI for. And we couldn't tell the difference.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's outstanding technology.
Thank you for doing that. This is very much the show for that moment we just had.
Awesome.
And I can totally nerd out for you. And the thing is also, what was very important were the lenses. That's actually more important even in some cases than stock or, you know, film stock or digital or any of that. Because the lens, the glass, basically the audience sees two things. The audience sees lenses and stock, or, you know, whether it's digital or not. So then you say to yourself, if you resolve one part of it, which is the question of how to treat the digital, the lenses were these, what they're called super Baltar lenses. They're owned by a great cinematographer named Ed Lockman, whom I've known for many years, and Darius has known for many years. He works a lot with Todd Haynes. He's a legend. And Ed let us use his lenses, and they're very old glass, and they look weird, actually. There's a little, because the center of the frame is very sharp, and it starts to fall apart around the edges. So you'll notice there are shots, for example, there's a wide shot of Tony Hopkins putting the kid to bed, and the kid is at the edge of the frame, is out of focus, but Tony's in focus, and they're both in the same focal plane. So the focus puller, who was one of the great focus pullers of all time, a guy named Eric Swanick, he did an incredible job, but the movie was a vexing challenge for him.
Wow.
But that's how you got it. You got it basically with the old lenses. You got it with a film grain look applied. Now, I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I was very jealous of anybody making a film about 3 or 4 months from now, because they're coming out with a whole new app, which finally, I think, bridges the gap. Do you know about temporal resolution?
I do not.
No.
In a digital image, you're basically getting the same grid with pixels each frame. And with 35 millimeter film, you're getting the grain is moving with every frame, the photochemical process. So that's part of the reason that film looks better, because digital, in order to get that look, you would have had to basically fill the entire Empire State Building with hard drives to do that. But there's an app apparently coming down the pike, like in a matter of months, which my color timer has seen. And apparently it gives you a kind of a new grain structure, visual information thing every single frame.
Oh my God.
I don't know exactly the details of it yet, because obviously it's not out, but he said that it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen.
Oh my God.
So it looked incredible.
That's incredible. That's
James,
great.
we're
thing. And now that we're moving out completely, see, you got me started. If Kodak tomorrow said we are going to manufacture, even though it's 100 ISO or whatever it was, a slow stock, but that we used to shoot Barry Lyndon or The Godfather or something, or Flute or something like that, which probably was 5263 or 5254. I can't remember the emulsion number. That would be incredible, and I would use it ASAP.
Right.
But it takes tens of millions of dollars and a huge amount of retooling to be able to do that. Now, having said that, I've spoken to Chris Nolan about it, who's very dogmatic about film, and he's obviously tried to get Kodak to do such a thing. And Hoyte van Hoytema, who's a cinematographer both Chris and I have worked with,
at Astra.
That's right, has certainly tried to get them to do it and stuff. Who knows? Maybe they will take the plunge, because they have gone weirdly retro with like Super 8 cameras and things like that. But that would be the greatest, because
we will never live to see the day when Mr. Nolan goes digital.
Well, never. Let me say this: that guy, God bless him, he still cuts negative.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's fantastic, and I love him to pieces. He's great. He's a great person too. But not all of us have the resources that, if the negative cutter makes a grievous error, to be able to fix that. I mean, we romanticize film. I mean, I'm old, so I can remember going into the negative cutters and seeing your film in just these strips all over the floor. And I would sit there like,
yeah.
You know, and they did make mistakes. They did.
Oh, we had a quick conversation about with Sylvester Stallone, who was restoring Rocky IV. And he talked about when they opened up the boxes that the studio had maintained, that it was chopped to pieces, and there were like sections where he wanted to go back and like rework, and whoever had cut it at the time had just cut it to the place where he couldn't work with it anymore. And he said it was heartbreaking. That's all he had left of his film.
So then, so what he did was, first of all, that's shocking to me that something like Rocky IV's negative would be in such bad shape. Although I shouldn't be surprised, because, you know, Spielberg has been public about this, that Jaws was in terrible shape before a big restoration where they spent a lot of money. But that tells you if Jaws is in terrible shape.
Right.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
No.
What other movies that we are not so famous, you know,
Stallone said, "Stop or my mom will shoot" was in the best shape possible. Yes, that's what he said. But his Rocky masters were destroyed.
Even the first Rocky, they never restored. Did any kind of work on that? The first Rocky they did?
I don't believe so.
That's astounding.
Well, no, you know what? It's not, right? Because even that's why we keep getting a new version of The Godfather every 5 minutes, because that what they used to do, obviously, is they had their negative, right? And then you had your camera negative, which then was you had to run it through the Hazeltine printer a maximum really of 3 times without getting it damaged to adjust what they call the printer lights, the color, all that, the timing. And then they would run that negative to make prints. And, if your movie was a big hit, ironically, you actually ran more risk. Jaws and The Godfather and Rocky were big hits, so they ran tons off the original negative.
Oh, wow.
So that's probably why they're in terrible shape.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
After my mom will shoot, I don't know if there was a lot of call for that.
that American classic. James, I think we've passed our time, but I haven't gotten in a question yet. Do you mind if we squeeze in one more before we let you go?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to get a little, just kind of big picture for you because the three of us are strangers to you. And this is such a personal story. And it's talking about some of the most intimate moments of your life with the closest people in your life. But everyone who goes to see it, for the most part, when that audience is full, it's going to be complete and total stranger. So how do you decide as a storyteller, I guess, just what we have the right to know and what we don't have the right to know? Because there are a lot of things that I wouldn't stop someone on the street and tell them these intimate moments of my life, but you're kind of doing the cinematic equivalent of that.
That's an amazing question. Okay, let me think about how I would respond to that. That's a great question. I guess the answer is, you stumped me a little bit here. The answer is, I guess I didn't, because I didn't think about where the line was and just do it as honestly as I could. I mean, there are things in it, not just for me or about me, but frankly about the world, about my friend Johnny, or the real person who's not named that, but it's painful as hell. But that's life. There's a difference in a movie like this. You can't really get away with. See, a lot of cinema is beautiful when it tells you the world as you wish it were, like it's a fable or something. Like, you don't watch, I don't know, Empire Strikes Back and go, that's realistic. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense, right? The cloud city of basements, like some kind of mythic gorgeosity takes hold. And the cinema can do that. It's amazing. But if you're doing a memoir like that, I don't really know what that would mean. So part of what I was trying to do was say, sadness and beauty are not exclusive to each other, and humor can live with tragedy at the same time. And all of this is what our lives are about. No one's life is free from good jokes. No one's life is free from disaster. So I tried to say, have at it. I'm going to show you everything. Now, by the way, let's be clear here. There are some people who love that. And there are some people who say, I don't want to see that. That's crap.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the case with every movie. That's the case with every movie. My father used to say, I don't care about, Star Wars because I don't want to see little robots talking. So, and that's like the most popular movie ever in terms of tickets sold, or maybe it was certainly the top 3 or whatever. So no movie, no matter what it is going to be for everybody.
Sure.
I'm just trying to stay true to what the tradition is for this kind of movie. And that is, it's sort of to attempt to answer your excellent question, which stumped me a little bit. I didn't have a line. Put everything in there. Most awful things can be said by children. Children are not innocents.
Right.
Children lie and are deceitful and can be bullies and bigots. They repeat what they've heard at home from their parents. And so I was just trying to say, here's the world as I think it was.
Well, I think it made the film all the better.
That's what you try to do.
James, I wish we had more time with you, honestly. This was a fantastic conversation. We loved having you on the show. But we know you have so much going on and that you have to get back to it.
Yeah, now I have to go get tiramisu.
Yes. Well, please come back on the show because we'd love for you to be a regular guest.
No, that's so sweet of you. I've loved this. And you asked fantastic questions. You stumped me with the last one. I don't know the answer.
I think that's a compliment.
We saved Jake for the end. He usually
He's our closer.
I wondered to myself, as you asked that, and I listened to it, I thought, oh my God, And I wondered if anybody could answer that, like any creative person, because when you're trying to do something, you're not consciously censoring yourself most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So then you ask yourself, well, wait a minute, should I be putting that in there? But that comes way later and maybe too late.
Right.
James, you should come back on next time, like when we have more time, because this show is designed for filmmaking fans, and like you'd be like a great co-host. That'd be amazing to have you on as like a co-host one time for one of our episodes, man.
You know, I'm like a fungus. I grow on you, and not in the best way. You know, it's. I think you get quite sick of me.
Or you're like glitter, and once you're on us, we can't get you off.
Yeah, man, dude. I remember talking to you at Lost City Z about film, man. I love your takes on that stuff.
If you bring a jar of this sauce you were speaking about, then
you're in.
Then you're in.
So if my computer would keep, because I'm in the guest house right now, which is kind of a place for my kids to hang out more or less. But if I were to walk across the garden, and if I could stay connected, which I can't, I would, because it'll cut us off. I would show you the sauce. It's cooking now.
Well, just come over. Don't worry. We'll be there in like an hour.
Hold on. You know what I can do? And then I promise I'll let you go. Hold on.
Okay.
Here's what I can do. I can show you. Check this out. You know what? I have a photograph of it, which I just took.
Oh my God, this is the
my
best.
wife. Can you see this? I just texted it. Let's see if you can see it.
Oh my God, it looks incredible.
Yeah,
there's two pots.
Yes, I made double the amount.
Dude,
Mine is opening.
Was that picture taken on film or digital? I'm just kidding. No,
I just opened it. I just opened it and I got extremely excited.
Oh man, that looks amazing, dude. Oh man.
Wow. James, thank you so much for your time. You were amazing. Appreciate you,
That was
sir.
awesome.
Congratulations on the film. It's wonderful, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to James Gray for joining us on the show. We should never do interviews like that when none of us have had dinner, because he showed us a picture of that homemade sauce, and I just wanted to climb through my monitor and sample it. And I do hope somewhere in the back of my mind that he jars some of it and sends it to us somehow, because that would be.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Outstanding. No. Well, it was a great interview, though.
A boy can dream.
We had a lot of questions for him. I had good questions that I wanted to get to. And I think he would have hung out if we had more time.
I had to beg to get one. I think it's the first time I've ever had to beg to get one question.
Also, like one of the things I was telling you guys yesterday, which I found really cool about this, was it was the constraints of it that made it better, because like you always hear about this saying, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So like, again, I'm not comparing us to Jaws or Spielberg, but one of the things I found interesting about Jaws, for example, is it's great because of the problems or the limitations that they had, and that made the film great. And in this case, we were told beforehand, as you heard in the interview, that he had a big meal and we were only going to get 20 minutes. And so it was like, and we were all like, we had 3 questions each, and it just turned out that he was just awesome in that setting, because there was this like clock ticking throughout the interview, and we knew that he had to go out and buy his tiramisu.
Oh my God, he's got that big meal. It's also like probably the first time, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, I've ever been told he's got to get out at this time. He's cooking a big meal.
Yeah. And what's funny about that was like, we heard that and we kind of joked about it. So like, I think at the top of the interview, I don't remember how it came up, but I think I said to him, like, what dessert are you going out to get? Cause he said he had to make a dessert, and he's like, I'm going to get a tiramisu. So we knew that he had to get somewhere. This was like Tom Hanks having to get to Lisa Marie Presley and Priscilla Presley after our ReelBlend interview, and then him staying an extra 10 minutes. But again, it's another one where the time constraint was 20, and it actually yielded a much more interesting conversation because we were on a clock like that. Yep. So it was really cool. And, James Gray did a really good job with this film. So I'm looking forward to people seeing it after hearing that. So
I hope we get him back too. I hope he becomes a regular. That would be a lot of fun. So, all right. So we're going to catch up with Black Adam real fast, which dropped 59% in its second weekend. It is currently at $252 million worldwide. Not gangbusters, but I think pretty good for this movie. Where do you guys feel about, how do you feel about 252 worldwide after 2 significant weekends, and the 59% drop, which is pretty average?
Yeah, 59%. I was looking at a chart is right in the middle of, like, quite literally in the middle of DC drops, with like among the best, smallest drops being Aquaman and Wonder Woman. And then I think even like Shazam was maybe like held a little bit better. But then you always have to take things in context, because like Man of Steel had a bigger drop than Black Adam, but also opened significantly bigger. So Man of Steel's second weekend was around what Black Adam did opening weekend. But I feel like 59%, like I feel like everything about this movie is it's either performing better than everyone seems to think it was going to, or people were just irrationally throwing negative predictions at it, because everyone thought that once the reviews dropped that like maybe it was going to do low 60s, maybe even high 50s, and it ended up doing what, 67. I saw a lot of people predicting somewhere in a 60 to maybe even a 70% drop, and ended up dropping 59%. Like it keeps not like overwhelmingly beating projections, but it's staying ahead of these like negative perceptions that people are throwing at it. I'm curious to see what Wakanda Forever is going to do to it. What, it's got one more weekend to kind of clean up before Wakanda Forever comes in. But I mean, what did we say that it's got to, for it to be considered a success? What number did we put out there worldwide?
I mean,
production
over
budget
500.
Production budget's 200.
That's so 500 to break even. At what point do we call it a success?
It's not going to break 500. Also,
It's got to be I think it's got to be over 700, because like BVS didn't do
You don't
that.
think it's going to do? You don't think it's going to do 500 worldwide?
No,
it hasn't opened in China yet.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I'm looking at 254 right now. We're in the third week of release. Black Panther opens next weekend. I don't know if I can see this doing another 250 million. Can you see it doing another 250?
No,
it's a lot of money.
It's going to be tough. If it didn't have Black Panther coming right behind it.
When's
maybe?
the China release?
I don't know. I'm not
I
quite sure.
want to say I read December.
Okay. It could do well.
It says
I don't know.
scheduled to be released in China on November 11th.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Black Panther Day.
So, yeah. So wait, does Black Panther come out in China that day? Let me check. Wakanda Forever.
The point being that I think Dwayne Johnson weirdly has powered this to do better than expected based on the initial critical reaction to it, and yet not quite up to the standards of something that would guarantee a sequel. Something where it made like so much money that you had to be like, oh my God, greenlight Black Adam 2 right now.
I mean, obviously 254 million is a lot of money. And we've talked about this in the show before, and Jake brings this up as well. At the end of the day, you know, reportedly the film cost somewhere around 200 million from what I understand. And then you got P&A, obviously. That's why we throw out a number like 500 to 700 million, because they have to basically cover the production cost and the promotion cost and all those things.
And he did a worldwide tour.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So honestly, if that movie makes 500 million, it's
to give a little context to we're talking about Chinese market opening up. Now, this was 6 years ago, but for BVS, which made 873 worldwide, its lifetime gross in China was only 95 million.
Okay.
Right.
So again, this was 6 years ago. So who knows what the appetite is?
But also, can you check, and I don't know if it's worth taking the time to do this, how well Dwayne Johnson's movies do? Because I feel like his
would be
movies
a good comparable for this of a because there's different Dwayne Johnson movies. You know, like Fast and Furious.
Skyscraper.
What about Jumanji?
Jumanji. Okay.
Oh, Jumanji would be a good one.
And what's interesting about this, though, is like 250 is obviously a lot of money, but think about that is such a front loaded number from the past 2 weeks of release. Like, do you think it has enough steam? Like, I'm almost worried about it breaking
41 million for the next level.
Okay. So with that information, I don't even know if it's going to break 400.
Yeah, might not.
And is that a success or a failure?
I think it keeps plowing through like November. I think like maybe it takes a dip with. Well, it's not going to go to zero. It's not going to be set to zero. So I think
how many screens does it lose? How many screens?
True, but it's got a whole another weekend before Black Panther, because it's got this whole upcoming. So it's got It's got 8 days, because technically Black Panther opens on the 10th, right? We're going to call it the 10th because of previews. So it's got 8 days to where it's got a clear field to make money before it even starts being impacted. So like I think it's going to be fine.
Because it's going to lose screens. It's going to lose every premium screen you could think of.
Sure, but keep in mind, as of now, it's been, let's see. So Friday to Friday, 7 days, and then the second week, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Math.
It's only been out 12 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
So $250 million worldwide in 12 days is not bad.
Now, wait a second. Now, comparing that now again, I know this is not a fair comparison, but just stand with me here for a second. Avengers Endgame opening weekend.
Oh my God. You can't.
Hold on a second. I'm just saying, I think did it do $1 billion in its first weekend? Yeah, $1.2 billion opening weekend. Now, that'd be like
me stepping on a basketball court and being like, Michael Jordan did way better than Jake did.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
The point I'm making is this. So if a movie made $250 million in its first 12 days, okay, I'm not saying Endgame and Black Adam are comparable in terms of like anticipation and release. But the point I'm making is Avengers Endgame is Marvel. And it made $1.2 billion in its first weekend. So my point being is if Black Panther's opening on the 11th, and that's a Marvel property, you don't think that that's going to just trounce everything in Black Adam's past?
I think so.
So my point being is that so we're at 250 right now. Let's say it makes another 75 million this weekend, whatever, and worldwide. I'm just throwing a number out. That brings us to 325, 330. Does this film break 500 million? I want to ask all you guys this right now.
Yes. I think so, yes.
Yes,
I don't think it does.
I think it does.
Kevin, you lost a bet to me that you didn't think it was going to make $50 million opening weekend.
Yeah, but you're bringing back old bets and mistakes that I made. That's fine. But I'm letting you know that this is where I'm at based on the facts that I'm looking at now.
I say yes
I don't
to
think
500 million.
Game doesn't break 500 million.
I don't think so. I think it drops another 35 to 40% this weekend, and then it practically. I mean, who knows what other markets outside of China that also it hasn't opened up in? Maybe that'll push worldwide.
Because I mean, aside from Wakanda Forever,
China's going to give it 60 million, less than 100 million. More, like
maybe
China is now investing in their own films. They're turning out for their own products.
If BVS did 90 million, that's Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
Black Adam's probably not going to make over 50 in China.
But what aside from Black Panther, what other major competition does Black Adam have in the month of November? I just think it's one of the, we often talk about those movies that we kind of forget about and then look up and go, oh my God, that made another $100 million after we stopped talking about it.
Well, I think it's front loaded.
To your point, though, you're talking about what does it have for the rest of November? Black Panther is the competition for the rest of November.
That's
Black
the
Panther's
Thanksgiving movie.
Last.
Yeah. Black Panther is the movie that people are going to go see on Thanksgiving with their families.
I don't know.
We'll see how reactions
I think it's going to be. I think that's going to be front loaded. Also,
I'm not saying. Every movie obviously clearly is front loaded. My point is, in this instance, while 250 sounds like a lot of money in terms of what this cost and what the promotion cost and what's coming up, I really don't think it's going to have the legs that you guys.
But let me transition over and tell you why I don't think any of this matters. Everything that we just discussed,
it doesn't matter.
Doesn't necessarily have. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because of the introduction of James Gunn and Peter Safran in DC films, right? Which I know you guys discussed on the show last week, but I didn't get a chance to sort of weigh in on their edition. They are coming in with a clean slate, and Black Adam is the last movie to kind of open not under their regime, right? So they can move forward and use Black Adam in whatever way that the new team seems fit. It's almost like if a Kevin, I'm sorry, but I'm going to use sports analogies. If a football coach gets fired and when they step in, they have a quarterback that they didn't draft, right? They're not penalized moving forward about how bad that quarterback might have been doing whatever they were going to do. They can point and say, well, they didn't know how to do Black Adam, and now we're going to use Black Adam and move forward. So all this box office talk in a normal situation. Oh, good. In a normal situation. Well, you've been watching the World Series a lot, so I'm proud of you. Yeah. Your commentary during the World Series is terrific.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I'm in DC right now, and that Dan Snyder news just broke. So there's a lot going on in the sports in this area.
Massive. That was massive. It's a little bit like James Gunn being able to do the Suicide Squad after David Ayer's movie didn't do as well. Like he was able to come in and say, I'm starting over. I'm starting over with some of the characters that you like, some that you don't like, but I'm going to do my stamp on it. That's going to be his impact on the DC universe moving forward. He doesn't have to necessarily factor in the decisions that were made on those previous movies because for the most part, a lot of them were mistakes. He can pick and choose the ones that he wants to continue with. Oh, Henry Cavill works. Let's take him back over and let's move in and potentially launch a Superman movie. I think it's a brand new day. You know, I think it can go in a number of exciting ways. And this is almost Black Adam, and the way that it's performing is almost like the death knell of the way that the DCEU has been for the better part of the past 10 years.
I think Black Panther is going to open up to more than Black Adam has made in its 12 days.
No.
I think Black Panther's opening worldwide will be bigger than what Black Adam has made in its first 2 weeks.
Then you think it's going to open to more than 256?
100%.
Domestically or worldwide? Worldwide.
256 is the worldwide number. So I think
because they're already calling for like 175 to 200 for domestic.
Domestic. Okay. I didn't know you meant worldwide.
Well, right. But remember, the number we're referring to with Black Adam is a worldwide number. 256.
Yeah.
So that's a worldwide.
And you guys remember
number.
2018 Black Panther's opening weekend domestic, right?
What was it?
202.
Yeah.
202.
What was the worldwide opening on that? Do you know that worldwide opening?
Ooh, that's harder to say. Keep talking.
Panther is Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever is long. It's long. It's like 245.
241. Yeah, 2 hours.
Which is insane because let's switch over to Avatar: The Way of the Water Boy trailer reaction. This movie's 3 hours. It's 3 hours and 10 minutes.
8 minutes. Yeah, 9 minutes.
I mean, but does that really surprise that? Like all of James Cameron's movies are.
No, 310.
No, the first Avatar was like 2 hours.
The first Avatar is 3 hours.
Like Titanic,
it's a
242. First Avatar. I don't think James Cameron ever made a 3 hour movie.
Titanic is 3 hours.
Well, it's Titanic. Yeah.
Do you think that the distributors, the exhibitors, I don't know what their reaction. I want to know what their reaction was when they were told that Avatar: The Way of the Water Boy is 3 hours and 10 minutes.
Dude, that trailer got over 1.5 million views on YouTube in its first hour on the Avatar channel. That movie is going to make so much money. They don't care how long it is.
I do seem to run into a lot of people these days who are very excited about that movie.
Like weirdly excited about that movie. And like
interesting.
People who I've never heard talk about Avatar in their lives are now like painting themselves blue.
Because we actually do forget how big of a worldwide phenomenon it was. And like, and what's interesting is like while it is the biggest movie of all time, I've been very vocal on the show that I don't like that film. And I think a lot of us, any of us like that film. Really, I mean, visually it was great, but story wise, it wasn't.
I tried hard to go back and rewatch it, and I couldn't.
It doesn't work. I mean,
I watched it. I made it all the way through, but it was like, ugh.
You're searching for an item you can't find. It's called unobtainium. I just don't like. You got to be really careful about like how. So my thought process. I texted you guys this earlier today. I'm excited primarily because of his track record. Like going into Avatar, when those trailers launched, and it was like from the director of T2 and True Lies, I was like all in. T2 is my favorite movie of all time. Now I think Avatar was a miss personally in terms of his filmography, but I do believe that he learned his lesson. I think this is going to be insane. I'm coming around.
But I got to say, and we texted about this morning, the new trailer does nothing for me. Like, I say that I'm excited for the film because it's James Cameron, because like the significance of a sequel to the highest grossing film of all time. But in terms of what they've shown us, like nothing about the plot makes me think, oh, I'm excited to see what happens there. And like, I know there's a lot of new technology and a lot of new developments, a lot of money poured into all of the motion captures to really make us look like these creatures are real. I gotta be honest, it just looks like a very well-made animated film to me. It looks like a very beautiful, like CGI animation, Pixar sort of. It doesn't look real to me. It just doesn't.
Also,
but to Gabe's point, we're watching it compressed on YouTube, and again,
But I felt that way about the first film.
right? The Fabelmans trailer or something like that.
That looks real to me. Those look like real people.
The point I'm making is that works in a YouTube setting. It's like it's a dramatic film. It's not a lot of high visual effects. I do believe it's unfair, especially with the technological advances he's probably made since the first Avatar, to judge it based on a YouTube trailer.
No. Okay, but wait.
You know.
Let me get into my issues of it really fast because they're not tied to visuals at all. There's the lengthiest setup through the course of the trailer is about someone who we haven't met yet hearing someone's heartbeat. Right. I hear her heartbeat. How does it sound? It sounds. Who are they talking about? I don't even know whose heartbeat they're talking about. For a minute there, I thought that they were talking about Zoe Saldana's. The tree. They're talking about the tree.
Oh, I honestly thought it was Sigourney Weaver.
I thought it was Zoe Saldana's, and I thought, did Zoe Saldana's character die in the movie? Like, I didn't understand. Then the
tree gets burned down, though.
Oh, mother of God! It's the tree's heartbeat.
Well, they connect to the tree. The tree was like the source of life. I haven't seen this movie in like 8 years, but I'm pretty sure the tree was like a big source of life for them.
I don't think
the tree was a thing.
The first Avatar.
In the trailer, what I'll say in the trailer, she says that, and then I believe it cuts to the image of that like tree.
Okay,
and
then it gets the
tree gets chopped
kicker,
down and burned, right?
The kicker, which is supposed to be the moment at the end of the trailer where you say like, give me a ticket to that movie right now, right? It's Sam Worthington talking to Zoe Saldana's character, and he's like, I'm going to need you, full throttle, like open heart, whatever you're going to do. And she reaches down to pick up her bow. And I was like, was she out of the fight? Like, well, I don't understand. Like, they didn't do anything in that trailer narratively to convince me like, oh, this story is going to be something else. Now, maybe it's a 3-hour movie and they're trying to cut it down to a 2-minute trailer, and fine.
There's fine, that, but I do think there was a lot there, but it just wasn't spelled out in the dialogue. Like there's images of her pregnant, I'm pretty sure. And I think with the teaser trailer that came out before, from what I understand the story is, I think that they've like lost their home in the first one because the tree gets burned down and like that's like the source of their community. And so I believe they're sort of like nomadic potentially at this point, but he's settled down. They have children. They have a family. They're definitely going to this like water tribe or this like other people that live in the water, the way of water.
There were others, yes.
And there was some conflict there about them joining them. And so I believe when he says that, I assumed, because maybe you've not seen she's pregnant or not, but I assumed that she had taken a more like settled down, like familial role,
maternal role. Yeah.
Like just the family has settled down or whatever. And now the fight is back and he's like, you're a badass. I need you to, we're going to have to go after this. I thought the action looked really cool.
So did I.
It was quick and stuff, but it looked like James Cameron showed up when it came to the set pieces so far. We saw very little of it, but
I thought it was cool, Gabe, when they went to like, so they like the most of the trailer obviously has that water bluish vibe to it, but when they would cut to those like darker scenes and like the like
underwater, like the darker scenes underwater, or
no, like even like in the anything with fire, it just looked insane. And then those like alien type robots that are like running that were in the first one.
Cool.
Yeah, it looks cool.
The robots underwater also looked really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, but he's doing Jack and Rose in a tunnel that's filling with water, though. I saw the characters running through some place and the water's climbing up, and I was like, oh, I hope he's not handcuffed to a pipe somewhere.
I have a question for you guys. If Avatar 2 comes out and you're disappointed,
right?
And you then know that when it comes to Avatar, in theory, if he goes 0 for 2 with Avatar, and we've got 3 more to go, how does it change your perception of not James Cameron, the director, because you can never take back what he's done up to this point, but James Cameron at this point in his career? How does it change how you perceive him to be the director that he became today if Avatar 2 is a miss?
It's an interesting question because like there are filmmakers that I've already kind of gone through that with, like Francis Ford Coppola, for example, right? Like, Coppola has a track record of classics, right? But like nowadays, I probably wouldn't be as excited as a new release for his just because the films he's done over the past couple, decade or whatever haven't spoken to me as much as the Godfather and Conversation and Apocalypse Now and Rumblefish. And so I think it's an interesting question because when we were texting about it today, it's like basically, if you think about it on baseball terms, I'm going to go sportsy here, Sean.
I love sports, Kevin. I'm loving sports, Kevin, lately.
Well, I'm kind of invested in this World Series because of the whole Bryce Harper thing, but that's a whole nother story. But in terms of like batting average, generally speaking, that dude is a Hall of Fame director. I mean, in terms of like,
well, in baseball, 300 gets you into the Hall of Fame.
Right. I mean, this guy has, Abyss, True Lies, Titanic, Terminator 1, Terminator 2. Sure. And then Avatar.
But then let me ask you, is it a career with an asterisk next to it where it's like you talk about like, oh my God, James Cameron was great. He ended his career with all those Avatar movies, but my God, do you start dividing Cameron based on before and after Avatar?
Yes, I think you do.
Well,
I think you do.
The only thing that saves him from the division, and again, I do not believe that money equals quality.
Agreed.
But
because like the first Terminator didn't necessarily break the bank.
Right. But his loss, his losing movie out of all the films he's done, if you want to call it that, is the highest grossing film of all time.
Sure.
So I don't even listen. You're not wrong.
I mean, but then you have to keep in mind. Then you have to equate that for Michael Bay as well. Like, that means Transformers 2 with the big metal balls.
I know. It's
like
terrible.
then that that's.
Well, last thing I'll say is this real quick, is in terms of when you're watching a film like this, like Jake's not wrong. Like when I sat down and watched the first Avatar, when it ended, like my heart sank a little bit. I was like, that was cool visually, but that was the same guy who did my favorite movie ever made. Yeah. I'm like, so I walked away, and to Jake's point, there was a part of me that was like almost disappointed and resentful towards that film. And I was telling you guys today, that's a really entitled opinion because, our perception is based on bias and things like that in general and the way we all live our lives. So yeah, if he does a second one and it's just as like, poorly written as the first one, but I don't know, man. I'm coming around on two though.
No one is immune to a lack of inspiration. Like the idea that anybody, like whether it be a filmmaker or a band, make something that is fantastic, right? And then we automatically turn around and assume that they have the ability to do that time and time again. And it's not the case. Like
even Stephen King's stuff isn't as good as it was in the 70s and the 80s.
Sure.
Right. Well, Dr. Sleep was amazing though.
Yeah, but I think the things you love about Dr. Sleep aren't in the book.
Flanagan. Yeah. Well,
keep in mind, there's no hotel in the book, Dr. Sleep.
But isn't and forgive me, I'm not a King like obsessed a fan like you guys are, but like when did Dr. Sleep come out? What year did the book come out?
Within the last 6 or 7 years.
Is that a great book in his bookography or whatever you'd call that?
I wouldn't put it top. I would say the best book that he's written like within the last 10 to 20 years, like 11/22/63 is great King. Revival is very good King.
That's terrific.
Revival's the one you guys wanted Flanagan to make, right?
Yes. Yeah. It would have been amazing.
Go ahead, Gabe. Sorry.
I want to make a point because we talk about lack of inspiration and this, that, and the other. And I feel like maybe we're just a little jaded. And story is king, and you should tell a good story when you're. It's
king of the world.
Yes, like I'm not excusing Avatar for having an uninteresting story,
unobtainium.
But if we're going to talk about James Cameron's career, we're going to talk about how we're going to look back at it and what is this going to be. I think it's something really special, especially if he gets to finish these. In that
big movie,
he is a master at the craft. Doesn't matter how bad the next ones are. He is a bona fide master of the craft who spent his millions learning about the sea and caring about science, and that became his passion after he mastered this craft and became successful. And I think his inspiration and his passion is to try to get people to appreciate the world that we live in. The natural.
He's a different person now, too. He's grown.
But I think that we're a little jaded in that if we can't look back at these and say that we got someone who's a master at this craft,
right,
who had millions of dollars to invest in himself to learn about this very specific thing, and pour all this love into to try to get us to appreciate, regardless of the story of the characters in it, and that is important. I'm not trying to completely put that aside.
Sure,
but the fact that this era of him is going to be this incredible saga and appreciation of the physical world that we live in and nature and what that means to him, and that he's had all these resources to do it at that level, I think is awesome. I hope that they continue to get better. But I wouldn't say,
mean,
I don't want to completely color it. Again, we've only seen one of these 5 movies, but I'd feel bad if we colored it as a group of fans, not just us specifically, but just like film Twitter, film fans, film history, as like that was the downfall of James Cameron when he. No,
but it just sort of feels like good for you, dude. Like I'm glad, like James Cameron has earned the right to do, if he wants to do Avatar movies for the rest of his career, he's earned the right to do that. Like that's, we talk a lot about Spielberg. Like Spielberg's at a point where he's earned the right to do West Side Story and Fablemans if that's what he wants to do. Like
Western, apparently. Let's go.
Or a Western, Western. Let's go. Spielberg. But like, and yes, there are good intentions behind it, and he's really testing the limits of technology and the message that he's trying to bring with it. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah. Also, again, this was coming at which is a fair question about like how are we going to look back at it?
Sure, that's a good question.
That's how I would hope we can look back.
Well, so then I'll throw that question back with the Coppola example. Do we look at Coppola that way?
Yes, I think we do view him that
honestly,
way.
I don't even really think of Coppola as like a today director. I think of him as a director of the past.
Right, but do you like? And it's funny, like. If I'm talking about filmmakers, right, and I'm mentioning filmmakers that have made great films, when I'm talking about Coppola, I'm not talking about anything really past maybe, I don't even know.
80?
80. Whatever.
Dracula?
But I love Dracula. Okay, it's a great, Bram Stoker's is great. So that's a really good one.
But that's early 90s. So we're talking 30 years since he's made like a great film.
Right, but we don't say, oh, Coppola was great until... And then we go. Well,
but I think the thing is that he hasn't really made that much lately.
He's made a few films. I mean, like Cameron's made one movie in the past 15, 20 years.
Well, that's a crime. What I mean? Like, and that's a crime. That's a crime.
And so I think the point I'm making is like we are in recency effect. We're talking about this right now, but Cameron is already, like Gabe said, a master filmmaker, and it's like it's one of those things. And again, this is I struggled a lot with this in my mind about like, I did not like that film, but it was my favorite filmmaker in terms of like a movie that changed my life. So now I'm trying to be a little more mature in my head about it and go, you know what? I have an entitled opinion about that first movie. I'm just trying to be a little more open and think, okay, what has he done technologically since then? Gabe brings up a really good point about spending his money on science and studying that aspect. You know, there's going to be a great environmental message in the film like there was in the first Avatar. I am just under the impression that a filmmaker of that quality had to have learned lessons from the first movie. He focused a lot on visual and less on story in the first one. And I just can see him going, let me not mess that up again. I want to prove everyone wrong.
All right. Before we end, and I know Gabe wants to move us on, I'm going to ask a morbid question. I don't want everybody to give your answer
question
to it.
At this hour?
It's Morbin time.
It's Morbin time, baby. When James Cameron passes away, and I hope it's not anytime soon, but when it happens, there will be a headline, and it'll say, title director James Cameron dies at age fill in the blank. It'll be the title of one of his movies. What
Titanic
movie?
Titanic.
What movie?
Titanic director James Cameron.
I don't know, because Avatar is the highest grossing film of all time.
But I feel like we remember we had this like the whole thing when we picked 2 movies for DiCaprio. The significance that Titanic has on our pop culture, on our psyche as a culture.
Yeah.
I just Terminator feel like is so much more insurmountable than Avatar. Or honestly, even like Terminator 2 obviously holds a significance to the 4 squares in this
people love Terminator 2.
People, but not the way, and it didn't have the sway over culture that,
Gabe, what do you
Titanic.
think?
My honest opinion is it depends which outlet is writing this article.
I can see Terminator 2.
That's an editor. That's an editor's answer right there.
But honestly, because it's like, depending if it's Variety, The Hollywood Reporter versus more of a fan site or whatever, which are just as big often, I could see Terminator having just as much weight for one place versus Titanic. But if we're talking about this is hopefully many, many, many years down the road, who knows how many other films he's made, but he's made 5 Avatar films. And if all of them make $2 billion or something, I don't know. We might be hard. That might just be the obvious answer is Avatar.
It might be Avatar mogul James Cameron.
Yeah. And Kevin, I'm going to be honest with you.
The first
I know you probably don't want
a trillionaire on planet Earth.
Kevin, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but if they were to refer to Terminator in terms of James Cameron, I don't think they would specify T2. I would think they would just say Terminator creator James Cameron. Yeah.
Well, Terminator would encompass
Terminator 1 and 2.
Right. They wouldn't be saying the Terminator.
They would say like the creator of the idea
director.
of the Terminator.
Yeah.
Also, Cameron is one of those directors that could warrant 2. It could say Titanic, Avatar
director. Yeah.
James Cameron.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Could. I know.
Did you guys see I saw an interview
recently
recently with Jordan Peele, and then I know we have to move. All right, we'll move on. I'll say it later. All right, go ahead.
Tell us after. Okay, we got to get to an ad break because we got to pay for some bills. Let's get to an ad break. We'll talk to you on the other side.
This week's episode sponsored by Avatar.
All right, and we are back. Let's get to some movies that are coming to theaters and to streaming. Apple TV Plus has a movie called Causeway that I'm looking forward to seeing. It stars Jennifer Lawrence and Brian Tyree Henry. It was at Toronto and then has made its way through. It was in Savannah, too, and I missed it as well, too. I understand it's quiet and sedated and a character study, but I love Jennifer Lawrence and I love Brian Tyree Henry. I will check out anything that they do. It is Apple TV Plus. It is called Causeway. Jakey, you saw My Policeman with Harry Styles.
I did.
It's going to be on Prime Video. Give me your quick reaction to whether this is worth checking out.
Oh, it's a very strong film. Story-wise, I'm going to be honest, it's nothing that you've never really seen before in that a young woman played by, forgive me, I can't remember her name, but it's the great actress who played Princess Diana in the most previous
Emma
season.
Corrin?
Yes, Corrin, I believe.
Corrin, okay.
And she played Princess Diana, most recent season of The Crown. She marries the character played by Harry Styles, who and then collectively they have a friend who is kind of like the three of them kind of make up sort of this tripod. And then she starts suspecting that her husband, played by Harry Styles, and this male friend who's a big part of their group are having an affair. This is 1960s England, so of course that sort of thing, it does not go over well. Aside from the fact that also Harry Styles plays a policeman, which is a profession in the 60s in England that was not okay with that sort of thing. Again, plot-wise, you've seen these angles before, but it's still very strong performances, very well made, strongly written. There's a really interesting plot device that flashes forward and back in time, which I think really adds some depth to it. And the big question coming out of it is, how good is Harry Styles? Honestly, I find him to be very good. I think maybe, this is what we're pushing for the Oscars is a little premature. Let's scale it back. Let's not get crazy. But he's very strong and holds himself up against some really great actors. So, it's on Prime Video, which I think is the perfect sort of experience to watch it. So I would say it is worth your time.
Cool. All right, over on Netflix, starting on Friday, which is the day that we are airing, Enola Holmes 2 is dropped, and I managed to see that one. Kev, you saw it?
No, I have some breaking news, Sean.
Oh, sorry.
I just got a delivery for With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood during the golden age of comic book blockbusters.
Yes.
It is currently 14 floors below me. So
Kevin, enjoy it.
That.
Read it tonight. Text me after. I want a picture of you holding the book, please.
Let's see. Hold on. Let me see. Let me check mine. Let's see. Mine
news.
says status. It says go fuck yourself.
Oh man, they sent you that message? I asked them to. That's rude. It's very rude of the publisher.
You got it gift wrapped with a little note that says that.
So I watched the first Enola Holmes in preparation for this. I didn't see it the first time it came around. And these movies are delightful. I legitimately wish that she would make a dozen of these movies. As Millie Bobby Brown playing Enola Holmes, who's the younger daughter of Sherlock Holmes, who is played by Henry Cavill.
Sister.
And they are sister. What did I say?
Okay.
Daughter?
Daughter.
Did I say daughter? Yeah. Younger sister. But she has been raised independently by their mom, who is a suffragette, who's played by Helena Bonham Carter, and is very rebellious and has given Millie Bobby Brown this rebellious streak. And it's about how she is trying to launch her own detective agency in the shadow of her older brother, Sherlock Holmes. Obviously, Henry Cavill is having a blast playing Sherlock Holmes. This one expands on the world very much so, starts to get into some of the expected Sherlock Holmes mythologies, but figures out a way to sort of filter them through Millie Bobby Brown. I think I've gotten so used to Millie Bobby Brown playing Eleven in Stranger Things, which is a little bit more intense and doesn't quite get to show the range of emotion that I forget that she's is
very
extremely
charming.
charismatic. Yes. And can be. So she does the fourth wall break throughout Enola Holmes. And it's hilarious. Like every time that she sort of addresses the audience and talks about what's happening in the scenes, it's very, very funny. It's done to great effect. And the mystery in this one is actually pretty solid too. Like there's multiple steps through it. I didn't see anything coming. There's a big secret that drops towards the end. And the director actually asked me during the junket, he was like, "Did you figure it out?" And I was like, "Dude, I had no idea." So he was like, "Oh, that makes me so happy," because he figured he thinks it's obvious kind of thing. And I was like, no, I had no idea. So very, very charming. If you love the first one, you're going to love this. And if you haven't seen either of them, I say dive into Netflix and definitely check them out because they are a very good time. Over on Roku. Roku is a service you can get for free, by the way. You could just sign up for it. And this week you might want to, because Daniel Radcliffe plays Weird Al Yankovic in a Walk Hard-esque biopic called Weird, the Al Yankovic Story. Kev, you said this is going to make your top 10.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that strongly about it?
Yeah. Right now, I mean, it's November 2nd. I mean, anything could happen in the next month and whatever. But in terms of this, I think, first of all, I didn't watch the trailer for this film, so I actually didn't know that it was a parody of Weird Al. So and it's, sometimes we get these like beautiful moments where you can actually sit down and watch a movie and not know where it's going or what it's about. So I obviously knew that Daniel Radcliffe played Weird Al. I think I'd seen like clips. I just didn't understand that the bit was basically going to be like, instead of him, he writes "Eat It" and then Michael Jackson covers it with "Beat It," which is a really funny concept. And like, to parody the parody king himself is kind of a smart idea, I would argue. And the guy who directed this, Eric, who you did a Q&A with in Savannah.
Yes.
He's from Funny or Die. I think his most famous, or one of his biggest videos, was he directed this short where Jewel dressed up in a costume and walked into a bar and karaoke Jewel songs and no one knew it was Jewel. Pretty funny.
That's
and
good.
so basically first of all, Daniel Radcliffe, the choice for him to play him is interesting because Yankovic's a big dude, like a tall dude, right? I don't know how tall Daniel Radcliffe is, but see, to me, the beauty of it is Radcliffe.
He's not very tall,
but he plays the character with the tall presence. Like he's so good at capturing the character in a way. And remember, this is heightened. So what's funny about it is, what I liked about the film was this push-pull. Like the film basically starts off by telling you, basically you don't know when you're in a parody and when you're in real life. So like the beats of the film are real, like, the songs that he released and, whatever. Obviously he had a relationship with Madonna and I don't know in terms of like what the relationship entailed, friendship or whatever it was.
Probably not to this extent.
I actually don't even think they really did have any kind of a relationship.
Really?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think they may have crossed paths, and I think she did want him to like cover one of her songs, but they
had a very famous funny interview as well, like in the 80s or whatever. He did doing his Weird Al thing, and she was a part of it. I don't know the full extent of it, but I do know that that's where that interaction, a part of it takes place. Yeah.
And I use the word relationship in just like in friendly way, not like a dating way. But in terms of that, and the point being is that there are bits that are real, and you are kind of pushed in and out of parody and real. So like, there's a great joke in the film about Led Zeppelin and Howie Mandel, and I won't tell you what the joke is, but Howie Mandel did really open for Weird Al in real life. So that joke is rooted in a real story. Mandel. Right. It's rooted in a real story, but it's done in a parody way. So I found that fascinating. Also, it's so cool that Weird Al went back and recorded the vocals. Like, one of the things that's really interesting about this film is Daniel Radcliffe is not singing in the movie, but he is singing while he's performing. One of the most annoying things you see sometimes, and this is also what happened on Bohemian Rhapsody, is Rami Malek was actually singing on set. Like, that way you get the throat moving. You see like the way a person would look when they sing. Even though they throw in Freddie Mercury's voice, it's still the actor performing it, and obviously the sound then becomes the actual version of the artist. So in this case, Weird Al went back and re-recorded all these songs, because a lot of the movie deals with the inspiration surrounding these songs. So like Daniel Radcliffe will come up with like "My Bologna" while looking at a thing of bologna while hearing "My Sharona." Right. So, but the brilliance of it is, and this is something I was curious about, because basically with songs that are that old, when you try to isolate vocals from music, I mean, it gets a little dicey when you're trying to deal with masters and things like that. So Weird Al went back into a studio basically and did all those again, but he pitched his voice back to where he used to be so that he could actually sound as if it was the younger version of Weird Al, because he hadn't recorded or sang a lot of these songs in a long time. That being said, it's hilarious. I thought it was really funny. It's also great messages about being yourself. I mean, even though it's heightened, I just thought it was really well done. I thought he was great. Evan Rachel Wood was great. I was just blown away by how much I loved this film. It was kind of a big surprise for me. I did not expect to love it that much. I expected it to like it. But I thought it was really funny and smart and just really well made.
All right, I'm going to throw a little wet blanket on it. I'll be the one who thought it was really funny for 45 minutes. And then I just thought it overstayed its welcome. All right. Because Kev's right with everything they brought up. The spoof elements are really funny. I got a kick out of a number of the cameos. There's some really funny celebrity cameos that you guys will see, and everybody kind of leans into it. There's a third act that I won't discuss here that goes pretty far off the rails. And even before we got to that point, because it leans into a lot of the cliches of musical biopics, right? Like it's Al gets he's not a drinker at all, but Madonna sort of forces him to start drinking, and then he becomes an alcoholic degenerate, and the band breaks up and all this jazz. And I was like, all right, we've seen all this before. I thought it was much funnier as he was figuring out who he was as a musician using the accordion, and how he thought it was so revolutionary to write alternate songs to existing things, and then his roommates were just like, well, why don't you just do that? Like it was such not a big deal.
His roommates were funny, man. Those guys were hilarious. Like, well, I love the positivity from them.
And you mentioned it was a Funny or Die skit, and I think that's the perfect venue for it. Like Aaron Paul plays Weird Al in that one, and Olivia Wilde, of all people, plays Madonna.
Oh, I've never seen this.
Oh yeah. There's a original Funny or Die trailer.
Oh,
and Aaron Paul plays Weird Al, and then Olivia Wilde plays Madonna, and then Dr. Demento, is that his name?
Yeah, Rainn Wilson's character.
That is Patton Oswalt in the short
perfect.
film.
Is it the similar idea? Is it a parody of a parody?
100%. And it was to the point where over the years, so many people saw that Funny or Die sketch and would ask Weird Al Yankovic, like, when are you going to make the movie that trailer is based on, kind of thing. And then he started showing the trailer before his live shows, so it became incredibly popular. Then I asked Eric Appel, the director, if he ever considered using Aaron Paul instead of Daniel Radcliffe. Was that ever a consideration to bring him in? And he said, no, they wanted to separate themselves from the short, so they didn't want to use any of the same actors. But Aaron Paul was supposed to cameo in this movie. He was going to play the character. At one point, Weird Al gets heckled from a crowd, like a biker bar crowd. Mm-hmm. And Patton Oswalt is one of the guys who was heckling him. And that was supposed to be Aaron Paul.
Oh,
the day
interesting.
He showed up on set. He tested positive for COVID, and they had to send him home. They had to send him home. Yeah. So regardless, I think it's a great skit. I don't think it's a terrific movie. I laughed a lot during it. I will say maybe it didn't help that I watched it on a screener, because I was in Savannah and it was one of the opening night films for it. And I sat in the back of the crowd and watched it play, and every joke crushed. I mean, just crushed. So this crowd was super into it. And so I'm maybe a little bit bummed that it's playing on streaming, because I think it would play really well with a crowd. So Jakey, where do you fall? Are you right in the middle of us, or?
No, I'm with Kevin. I think it's probably a top 10 movie for me right now. I honestly think it's probably among the funniest movies I've seen in the past few years, in terms of the degree that I was consistently laughing and just how hard I was laughing. And honestly, I watched it on my laptop because I couldn't get it to play. So we're talking about watching a movie on my laptop, sitting on my couch, just dying laughing. Honestly, the third act that you're describing, when it gets to that ridiculous nature, once it's so far beyond the point of like, oh, maybe we're tethered to some sort of reality, when it gets to that final act, is probably when I was laughing the hardest. Yeah, it seems to just be so fully aware of what it is, but also one step ahead of us in terms of like where we predict it's going to go. It's like, yes, we know you know what kind of movie this is, but you don't know that we're about to go here. And then they go there, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. Radcliffe crushes it. Just, I mean, in terms of just pure, like how much laughter that brought out of me, it just, I absolutely loved it. I honestly, it's for me, it's a 5 out of 5.
It was like therapeutic. I haven't laughed like I was crying. I was laughing. And I mentioned that Led Zeppelin bit. I'm not going to ruin the joke, but there is just so many. That line made me laugh so hard. I'm just like,
but I would say also, if you get the chance, once you watch the film, go back and read Weird Al's Wikipedia page, and you might be surprised at how much in the movie did kind of happen to some degree. Like even like Rainn Wilson's character seems like this wild person that like would be a part of like the parody. Like there's no way that like that's the no, that's exactly who he was. And yes, like the movie kicks off with an accordion salesman knocking at Weird Al's door, which is exactly how he ended up getting an accordion. Like an accordion salesman knocked on his door. So it was kind of fun to realize, like, to play the game of like parody or truth. And I think there's a lot more truth in there than you think there is.
Yeah, and like to Jake's point, like it's funny. Like when we interviewed Weird Al for the press junket, and I had him clear up 2 of the things that happened in the film, and one of them was the name scene, because there's a scene where Rainn Wilson, like, and it's an over the top moment where he gives him the name Weird Al, and I was like, how accurate is that to?
I thought he called him Al Solo.
Al Solo.
Oh, my bad.
No, but I was wondering like where did the name come from? And so while that is not true, like it actually came from the college dorms. He was like apparently in college, and people called him Weird Al, and then he got a radio show, and that's where he kept the name Weird Al.
I'm the weird one.
Right. But I mean, to Jake's point though, like the beauty of the film is that you don't really know when you're in I mean, you obviously know that Michael Jackson wrote Beat It first. But you know, at the end of the day, like it is rooted in enough reality that, and then the guy's already a parody artist. So it's like, it's kind of like 3 levels of meta inception.
It's the only way to do his story. Essentially, this is the only way to really do his story.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go from one coming of age story to a completely different one, which is James Gray's film Armageddon Time. We heard a conversation with James earlier in the show, and I thought that this was really touching and really devoid of sentimentality, and I mean that the nicest way possible. I think he paints an incredibly accurate picture of what it was like for him as a smart-ass kid to grow up in a Jewish family in the 1970s, early 80s?
80s, because that's to me, because Reagan, 80s? Right?
Oh, Reagan, that's right. So it is centered heavily on...
Reagan gets elected in the time of the movie.
Right, exactly. And you have... it was weird to see, because in doing research for interviewing him, I saw some scuttlebutt that he was getting some flack for casting non-Jewish actors, because he has Anne Hathaway playing... the version of his mother, and then who's the guy from Succession?
Jeremy Strong
is playing the father. And
by the way, I haven't heard the word scuttlebutt in a long time. I just wanted to point that out. That was,
there you go.
Thank you.
$5 words. But I thought the cast was fantastic. Like I understand some people's concerns about why not cast some Jewish actors in these parts, but I really thought that they brought the sentimentality, or lack thereof sentimentality, that was really appropriate for bringing this family unit together. I don't think anything extraordinary happens in the plot. It's very, very character driven. There are some really beautiful moments that are really small. One involves just Anthony Hopkins sort of implementing life lessons to his young grandson. There's a lot of, much like most of James Gray's films, he's very heavily focused on the short amount of time that we are here on this planet. And in something like Ad Astra, he'll send Brad Pitt like to the furthest extent of the galaxy just to confront his father. He's rooted in that. And I think that this is a really good antidote to the epic scale of Ad Astra. It's very small. It's very rooted in this community. But he doesn't shy away from, as he mentions in the interview, he doesn't shy away from really difficult, complicated conversations about race and how people felt about race. There's a relationship between the young boy who is supposed to represent James Gray in this movie and another black boy at his school, and how they sort of bond over being class clowns. But can they be friends, and which one of them is getting each other in trouble, kind of thing. And I related a lot to that. Like, I saw those kids who, performed in class to get the attention of their classmates or angered the teacher. And I saw, or maybe lived through experiences where you pushed your parents past the limit of them being able to put up with your shit anymore, kind of thing. And I think James Gray accurately embraces that. It's not the most entertaining film in the world, but it is definitely an accurate portrayal of what he went through at that time. And I think opened my eyes a lot to experiences that I myself didn't go through, but to see it through the eyes of another character. I think the filmmaking throughout it is fantastic. He's obviously a great filmmaker. And I have to give props to Jake's girl, Annie Hathaway, who I don't normally like. And I thought that she was spectacular in this. Like, really, really great in a difficult part. So I haven't talked to either of you two about it since I watched it. Jakey, what'd you think?
Yeah, I think you really perfectly nailed it. It's a very, very strong film. It's a hard film to walk out of going like, oh my God, I love that so much. It's just not that kind of film. I do love these sort of slice of life movies where it sort of feels like you snuck into someone's apartment and you're kind of just hiding in the back of the room and listening to the people live their lives. Like, it just sort of feels like you're stepping in, you're eavesdropping for a little bit, maybe hearing and seeing some things that you shouldn't be hearing and seeing. And then when you get to the point where you sort of feel like I've seen enough, then you kind of just step out. But because of that, it feels very raw and real and intimate. And as he mentioned in our interview, there was no line in terms of what he felt like we did and did not deserve to know. And I think the film is better because of that. It is anchored by these just really wonderful performances. You mentioned Anne Hathaway, but I think Jeremy Strong as his father, if I saw his name on a short list for a supporting actor nomination, I wouldn't be mad about it. And Anthony Hopkins, I mean, there's not much that can be said by Anthony Hopkins that hasn't already been said. But like, I just want to make sure we don't sleep on how good he is in a role like this, because he's always good in just about everything he does. But like that scene he has with his grandson on the bench, and I know Sean, you had a question ready to go about that, and I would have loved to hear James Gray's answer about it. It's just such a beautiful, powerful moment. And there are all these sort of singular things about the film. It's really well written. Some of the messages at the end maybe are messages that you don't want to hear, and they're not like quite the uplifting, life affirming messages that you want to see transpire between parent and child. But they're probably very real conversations that have been had multiple times throughout history, probably even including today. And I think that's one of the most relevant things about this film. Is that there are so many elements that, even though, and we talk about this with films sometimes, even though it takes place in a very specific place and time and in a area of New York, you could take the events of this story and place it in 2022 Chicago, or you could place it in 1990 Charlotte, or probably place it in 2005 DC. And probably have the exact same story and have it make sense. And there's a lot of aspects of this story that's a shame that's the case, that is the way it is. Incredibly strong film. Again, I don't know if I crossed exactly into that threshold of, oh my God, I love this. But everything about it, I would say, is absolutely worth your time to seek out and see.
I ended up 3.5 out of 5. Like that's
exactly what I would do too.
Yeah. Kev, where are you at?
I'm in the same place. It's interesting. This film, I think Jake kind of brings up a good point, that there's an uncomfortable aspect to the way it tells you life lessons. And it is something that is, you do walk away from this film with not a numbness, but like you're questioning a lot of what you just watched. You don't really, I think when it ended, I was just kind of in a stage of like, okay, what was James Gray trying to say with this film. And obviously there's a really powerful scene between Jeremy Strong and Banks, who plays the young boy Paul in the film. That really kind of sums up the film in a way. And it's that to me was interesting. Performances are incredible. I mean, Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong are amazing. Banks, who plays the young boy Paul, he's phenomenal. But Anthony Hopkins, obviously, like that was like one of my favorite performances I've seen from him in a long time. It's a very special character, reminded me a lot of my relationship with my grandfather. I mean, there was that fun little thing you have with a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt who will let you do something fun that your parents won't let you do. I mean, even though that he was allowed to launch this rocket, it was like his special thing with his grandfather. It was like this cool thing that he had with him. It's a film that has a lot to say. And I think, to Jake's point, a lot of it is uncomfortable. And I think a lot of it is meant to be uncomfortable because it deals with very uncomfortable subject matter, but subject matter that's important. And Hopkins's character is incredible because of his forwarding positivity to give this kid knowledge and tell him how to act. One of the things that James said yesterday in our interview, which I thought was really interesting, I never thought of it before, is like, I think I'm going to steal this from Timothée Chalamet, who I think probably took this from somebody else eventually. But, the moment we really kind of grow up really is the moment when we realize our parents don't really have it together either. You know what I mean? Like, because when you're growing up, there's this idea in your mind that your parents know everything and that you eventually, when you get to that age, you'll be okay as well. And then when you realize that your parents are just human beings that are going through this life just like you are, it's shocking. Like it's a shocking revelation that you are going to also go through life this way. But then James made a great point off of the point I was just talking about that Chalamet said, which was, but grandparents are on a different level. They've already done it, and then now they're seeing their kids do it. And I used to sit around. My grandfather passed a year and a half ago, and I'd sit around the dinner table with him and my family, and I remember, like, I always wondered, like, why he found so much satisfaction and happiness just by sitting at a table and having dinner with his family. And I just remember, like, and it made me think about that when I was watching the film, just the precious time that we have here, the precious time that this grandfather has, knowing that he's dying or could be dying at some point, and knowing that his grandson is going to have to go into this world without him at some point because he's getting older. Yeah. And I just found that to be a fascinating thing that James Gray said about grandparents and parents. Like they're almost the ones that know. They do know the most. They've lived the longest.
In theory, sure, in theory, but their viewpoints could be skewed as well too, which is interesting.
And there's no question. I'm not saying grandparents have everything figured out, but they do know more because they've been alive longer, right? Yeah. And so I found that to be a really interesting perspective of like what, because I mean you're watching this film and it is so hard hitting when you deal with parents who are going through their own losses and trying to also raise their children at the same time. Yeah. There was just a lot of things that hit. I don't know if any of this is actually making sense altogether, but there was just a lot of themes in this film that I've actually thought about a lot post seeing it. The film has actually grown on me. When I first left it, I was like, okay, what was that? And then now, even talking to James Gray yesterday, sometimes an interview like that really can open up the floodgates of kind of where you're going with the movie. I'm not saying an interview has to be the reason why you find things in movies you like, but the way he talked about it then recycled moments in my mind of the film. And I'm like, yeah, that works. So I think people should see it. It's just a very
absolutely
uncomfortable film. And it's not a film that's like, you're going to walk out on a Saturday night and go, all right, let's go out and party. Like, it is a really serious film that deals with uncomfortable truths, as Jake said.
All right. So Kev praised Anthony Hopkins. We all praised Anthony Hopkins and his performance in this, which is a part of the reason why he is the subject of our blend game this week. Hashtag Anthony Hopkins blend. Kev, I'm going to stay with you. I know you just took a big swig of water, but tell me which direction you went with in choosing Anthony. And I want to point out to the people too, with that, we took Silence of the Lambs off the board because we figured that was too obvious of a choice. And obviously this man has so many other amazing credits to his resume. So where'd you go? That
would
was
everyone
not
have picked Silence? Like would because I know I would have picked Silence of the Lambs.
I probably would have had to. Yeah, I think so.
I would have, but the one, so So my choice is actually, I'm going to cheat because there's two of them I'm going to mention. The best performance I think he's ever given, in my personal opinion, aside from Hannibal Lecter, is The Elephant Man. I just think that what David Lynch did with that film, I ended up seeing Bradley Cooper perform it on Broadway. That film is outstanding. And Anthony Hopkins is phenomenal in that movie. Was it John Hurt who played the Elephant Man?
Yes.
So
I'm a human being.
Yeah, that's an amazing performance. So the one I'm going to choose as my favorite, it's going to be a little weird. It's a movie called Fracture. It's a movie with
it's a great movie.
Ryan Gosling. And so what's funny is I'm going to bring up, this is actually the reason why I'm bringing it up. So we're dealing with favorites. So just to clarify for our audience, like when you're talking about a favorite, there's a personal connection to it. So with Fracture, I remember seeing it. And I remember going to a screening for it in DC. I didn't know much about it. I just knew it was Ryan Gosling and I knew it was Anthony Hopkins. And I remember it ending going, man, that was awesome. Like, where did that come from? Like, it was such a great story. Anthony Hopkins is great in it and Ryan Gosling's great in it. So I went up to Toronto. I think the film was at Toronto. It was for TIFF. Actually, Hopkins was promoting a Woody Allen film at the time. And I remember I had seen Fracture either recently or relatively recently to seeing him. And I walked into this press conference and Anthony Hopkins is just standing there. And I walked up and he proceeds to tell me, one, that I look like Ryan Gosling, which was like the greatest compliment of all time. I was like, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. And then he goes, don't call me Mr. Hopkins, call me Tony. And I said, no, I will not be calling you Tony. That is not happening. But that memory of that moment, but then also loving that film. And then, because remember, this was like right when I was first starting off doing like television and or radio junket. So I had never really been in a room with someone like that famous, someone that I had loved watching. I'm trying to remember the exact time period of it, but I was very young or early in my career when that happened.
Fracture was like 2004, I want to say.
Or 7. Was it?
Is it that late? Let's see.
Double check that. I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Fracture is 2007.
No, you're right. 7. Good call.
So, all right. So this would have maybe this was a year or two after. I don't remember the specifics of it, but and that's right. Cause I was in Toronto, not covering TV. I was up there covering I was covering radio roundtables. It was the year I did Never Let Me Go. And that movie Conviction, I think, with Hilary Swank and Sam Rockwell. So, point being is that like that film will always have a special thing because I remember loving it, and then being able to tell the person who's in it that I loved it was like a surreal thing for me. I had never, I had to that point. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned the year because I'd started off in radio in 2005, and the radio shows that I were doing were all the filmmakers behind the scenes, the composers, the directors, the people that I really wanted to geek out with. I had never really had an opportunity to tell an actor of that scale what I thought about a film of theirs. And now we do it all the time because it's our job. But to go walk up to Anthony Hopkins and tell him, like, dude, I loved Fracture. It was just like a weird thing. So going back to the point of seeing Fracture, I love that film. It was a film that I just remember shocking me because I didn't expect it to be that great. I think it's an underrated film with Anthony Hopkins. He's great in the role, but I also have a personal tie to it that kind of brought me back to that memory of meeting him for the first time. So Fracture is my choice.
Jake, did you also pick Fracture?
I did not. I chose Meet Joe Black, which is a movie that I really love. Double VHS. If you're unfamiliar with the film, it is a movie in which Anthony Hopkins is about to have a heart attack. He's dying, and Death shows up, and Death is played by Brad Pitt, who basically says, "Look, it's your time." And Hopkins
impossibly
says,
handsome Brad Pitt
impossibly,
as well,
ridiculously handsome Brad Pitt.
Yes.
And there's a reason that Death looks like Brad Pitt.
When I met Anthony Hopkins, he told me I look like Brad Pitt. That's funny. That
no, he said you look like Death.
Oh, well, he was referencing, we were talking about the movie.
Yeah. And then there is, I won't go to the details, but there's a reason that Death looks like Brad Pitt. And Hopkins basically makes a deal with Death and says, look, I would love to have just a couple of more days, like to get my affairs in order, say goodbye to people in my life that I need to say goodbye to. And Death says, fine, I'll give you a couple of days, but like, you got to show me around. Like, I don't really know much about this world. Like, let me, like, you gotta take me on a tour.
I've never seen this, Jake.
Oh, it's a really sweet, powerful film. And so all the while, Anthony Hopkins is taking this sort of like puppy dog Brad Pitt around the world and showing him to things. And Death meets Hopkins' daughter and falls in love with her. And Hopkins is basically like, what the hell? You can't fall in love. You're Death. You can't fall in love with my daughter. So it does turn into a very sort of schmaltzy romance between the two. But Hopkins gets what I think is the best role in the film, in that it's one of the first roles of his that I can remember that he really is reflective on death and his age and kind of looking back. And it's really that moment where in those couple of days, he's, this big business tycoon, and, he's flying all over the place in his private helicopters, and he's got all this and that, and this big birthday party that's going to be happening. And he's got, one daughter that feels neglected and one daughter that feels, he really takes that time to kind of pause and step back and take a moment to realize what's important in his life. And, at the end of the film, he has, I won't ruin it, but he has just this beautiful moment with Death where he basically says, like, thank you. Like, I know you showing up means that I'm dying, but you showing up and telling me I'm going to die gave me the opportunity to, like, see my life and do everything the way I wanted to do it before I had to go. And it's just such a beautiful film. Thomas Newman's score is one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard for a film, particularly in that moment that I just told you. It's gorgeous. It is long. Like Kevin said, it's a double taper. It's 3 hours, but it's just a beautiful Anthony Hopkins performance. A very fun sort of puppy dog, like Pitt portrays Death as like a little naive, but then like has this fun, sinister edge to him in a lot of ways. So yeah, far and away, a lot of people don't like this movie. And so I feel the need to go out of my way to champion it because I think it is a beautiful, beautiful film.
All right.
Sean,
yes.
Before you choose yours, do you mind if I guess what yours is?
Ooh.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm only going to guess this because this is also one that I was thinking about, and
Right.
I have a lot to say about it, but I think The Father is your choice.
Bingo, Kev!
Wow.
Way to go!
Well done.
Nice
Well done.
job.
Wow.
And I find it entertaining that Jake chose Meet Joe Black, which in 1998 cast Anthony Hopkins as a man who was dying, because 20 something years later, this poor man is still playing an aging man who is like, was he ever young? Can you remember an Anthony Hopkins role where he was like
Elephant
dashing?
Man. He's younger in Elephant Man.
But he's still like a good looking older man in
Yeah.
Elephant Man.
Yeah. What is his
I think he just got famous later in life.
Later
like
in life?
does he have like a Paul Newman hustler era of him?
Not
like
that
where
I'm
he was
aware
like that
of.
young?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe
It's
he
funny
did a
we
lot
have
of
that
stage.
one.
I think he has a lot of stage. I think he probably did a lot of live theater coming through London before.
Yeah, he has
got
that
into-
one look. We've always had him. Like I feel like Morgan Freeman, Anthony Hopkins, like there are actors who just have looked
They were just
like
old.
the same in our minds for years.
Even Nicholson, you could find young Nicholson performances.
yes. I
Anthony
know, but, like,
Hopkins has always been
Nicholson-
old.
That's funny. Yeah.
All right, so The Father, and again, this is Regency bias because having seen it just recently.
Great performance.
But I remember watching that movie and being convinced that Anthony Hopkins was suffering through the dementia that is plaguing this character. Like, it is that convincing of a role that I legitimately thought this poor man is going through this. And some of that, of course, goes to his performance, and some of it goes to the way that the film is directed, because if the film is meant to keep you off guard, you're supposed to be off kilter and feel the confusion that the character is going through. And I thought that was masterfully done. And because it's all about confusion, you think about how controlled Hopkins has to be in what he's showing you, because he has complete control over, that performance. And yet the performance is supposed to be showing you someone who has lost control, who reality is slipping away from them at that point. And that is a story. So Meet Joe Black gets a lot of flack for being like overly sentimental and schmaltzy, and that's the knock on it. The Father is the most blunt and raw approach to having a parent who is suddenly going through that, because it's from Olivia Colman's perspective often, and the things that Anthony Hopkins will say to her, which just from what you've experienced is not true, or or things that he's confusing that you've witnessed, sort of thing. It's a brilliant performance, and it's a brilliant performance with a brilliant script. And then when Hopkins showed up to receive his Oscar, his well-deserved Oscar, I thought it was such a beautiful speech that he gave, because he didn't travel to the show, and he just recorded this thing out in the field, and he was just like, "Hey, it's just me, it's Tony. I'm having a great time out here. Everything's going well. God bless you. Stay safe. The world's crazy right now." And I was like, "Oh my God, Hopkins is still fantastic." But so convincing in that part. Such a rewarding movie. Well, I did the Fracture junket, so I got him for that.
Oh,
and I won.
Man. Cool. Was he paired with Gosling for that?
They were not paired. No, they were individual. They were solo.
Movie,
and I've got, if I go back over, I think I've gotten him a couple of times, but I have to go back over.
I'm trying to think of what I got. Dude, you know what's crazy? I got him paired with Bruce Willis.
Oh, so did I for Red 2.
For Red 2.
Oh, Red 2.
I remember in that interview, I told Bruce Willis, I don't think he knew that Hopkins was only in Silence of the Lambs for like 17 minutes. And I think I brought that up I remember Willis. But wait, back to The Father for a second. You nailed it perfectly, because that was the first time I had ever truly got an understanding of what that would feel like. And I feel like, I've had family members who have dealt with that. I've seen it. I know I have friends who have gone through it with their family members. But until you watch like an immersive movie like that, and obviously without going through it yourself, it is one of those things that gives you a very much a deeper understanding into that confusion and that idea. And that's why I love movies so much. And obviously movies are movies. They're being made, and they're meant to emotionally immerse you. But sometimes some of the greatest movies of all time and greatest performances of all time can give you a better understanding of a life circumstance that you may or may not ever experience. And I think that performance, I remember watching that film. I watched it after he won. I didn't see it before he won. I watched it after he won.
Yeah.
And I was excited. I don't remember what the timing on it was or why I couldn't see it prior. And I remember putting it on going, all right, I want to watch this. The Oscars gave him Best Actor. I mean, it's got to be a good performance.
Well, and everybody thought Chadwick was going to win immediately,
right. But damn, like that was, it is one of the most impactful performances I've ever seen. Like it is genuinely amazing. And listen, I loved Chadwick in that movie in Ma Rainey. I thought it was Ma Rainey was what he was up for, right?
Yeah.
And that performance was amazing. And I would love to have seen him win. I think they're both great performances. That's why I don't, when you pick one or the other, but damn, man, that performance, such a great performance.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you guys check it out. Audience picks. Dave Hammer went with The Mask of Zorro, which also stars Antonio Banderas. Anthony, Kal-El Komertz, and others says his role in Westworld, which is also a very strong performance by him. Harry Lichtman and Daniel McDonald says if it's not Hannibal Lecter, then The Father. Nelson says Fracture, and Ariel Pace went with The Remains of the Day. So good choices across the board.
Another Fracture. That's good.
No one said Meet Joe Black.
No one said Meet Joe Black. No. Maybe
probably because they're too emotionally devastated to type.
When we play Claire Forlani blend, that'll probably come back up.
Claire Forlani, she's from Mallrats, right?
She is also from Mallrats, yes. I think she got Joe Black because of Mallrats, actually, honestly.
What? That's awesome. Yeah, Kevin Smith, man, he's connected to everything.
Because I think this is the movie she did shortly after Mallrats. So
I always had a gigantic crush on her because of Mallrats. Like
I did too.
I it's funny, I don't.
And
is
Jason
she
Lee.
Still working today?
No, not at all. No. Not that I'm aware of.
She not at all. Do you know that for sure?
I feel like I haven't
of.
seen her in a lot of films, and I thought she was a great actor. I really do. I thought she was great. I mean, I love her in Mallrats. I mean,
where are my Clarettes? Come on, Clarettes, weigh in and tell me what Claire Forlani has been up to in a long time.
She is still working. She is working in television. She is going to be in Twilight of the Mallrats.
Oh yes, that's right. They're doing a sequel.
If that happens.
Still working.
I would like to interview her. I've never interviewed her before.
Wow. So much participation this week. Thank you for everybody who playing along with Sir Anthony Hopkins. For next week, reach out on Twitter using hashtag Marvel Duo Blend, and let us know your pick via email at realblend@cinemablend.com. You're picking a Marvel Duo. Gabe, clarify this a little bit for us.
Yes, so next week is Black Panther week, Black Panther 2. So the MCU has a number of sort of team ups or like character duos or fun stuff, and so you're going to send in your favorite character duo in the MCU.
Can you give an example?
Interesting.
You're thinking of like
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Cap and
right?
Bucky. You're thinking of Thor
okay.
and Hulk. You know, like they have a lot of great scenes together. Rocket and Groot. One of my favorite that I think is underrated is Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch. I think they're the handful of scenes that they have together are always really good.
Yeah. Okay. I like this. I was just trying to get an
This is fun.
understanding of.
I like this.
Are there parameters?
This is cool.
She-Hulk and Megan Thee Stallion.
She-Hulk and Megan Thee Stallion.
But do they have to have done like multiple scenes?
There are
Like,
no
could it-
parameters.
like-
Just your favorite duo, favorite character duo. Like it can be for any reason. It can be for one particular
Like
scene.
Bucky can
whatever
also
you're-
be with Sam. Like they've been in a
Bucky
number
and
of different
Sam?
things. Yeah.
But it has to be a
Sam,
superhero, right?
Cap
It can't
and
be
Bucky?
like.
No,
It can't
it
be
can
like
be
Jacob. Can it be Jacob Batalon and Spider-Man? Like, does that?
I would
count
say
kind of
you
thing?
have a really weird taste, but you're welcome
I'm
to
not
choose
going
it.
to.
You're welcome to
Trying to
choose
do
it.
the parameters.
There are
Yes,
no
of course.
parameters.
It could be.
Marvel
It could
character
be.
duos.
I'm going to choose Spider-Man and that dude that says, do a flip, Spider-Man.
There you go. That's a powerful. Don't give your pick away.
No,
Leave it for next week.
Sorry.
Or Diamond Hansu's like. He's like, I'm Star-Lord. He goes, who? I always love that. I always love when he says who. It's so good.
All right. We're going to have a premium episode that's dropping on Monday. So check the description below for where you can sign up to get your access to premium episodes. In the meantime, we'll be back very, very soon with brand new episodes. Follow us on social media in between at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, at Sean_O'Connell, at Gabe Kovach. And the show is at ReelBlend. This is tough, guys, because we're bringing the show to a close and we don't have anything fun to shout anymore. So,
A man called Otto.
there you go.
What happened to
take
hockey
it.
pads?
The way
hockey
of-
pads is still relevant.
The way of water.
The way of water. The abyss.
Yeah.
Wait, do you think the Avatar 2 is going to have like sponsorships by water companies like Aquafina and like
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Like Dasani is going to be like the it's going to have like an
100%.
Avatar.